Hi guys, welcome to my new video. Don't forget to leave like and subscribe, and let's jump into new interesting subreddit. Would the world be a better place if we put a minimum age of 18 on social media? Why not? Not taking a position either way, just food for thought. In China, they ban children from playing online video games past 10 p.m. on weekdays. To play, you must enter an ID number, only given to adults. The number of players aged 60 to 85 skyrocketed, obviously not because the elderly suddenly got into League of Legends when the kids were gone, but because the kids simply borrowed grandma's ID card. The government has so far been unable to enforce this law. No. Clearly the elderly wanted to play LOL but couldn't because their grandkids were hogging the computers. As soon as the ban came in, grandma and grandpa could enjoy retirement. Plot twist, children don't exist, all gamers are over 80. I remember when Second Life started requiring a social security number as proof of age and everybody just used Elvis Presley's. And then they blacklisted his, and they moved on to Shaquille O'Neal's. And the cycle continued. Wasn't it easier to only allow one ACC for SSN? Man, I would love adults gaming only time. Maybe finally I can finally be good at shooters again instead of getting destroyed by some 12-year-old. Kids are online 24/7 because of time zones. I would hope they play on their regional servers though. Aside from having to actually verify, which is kind of scary in my opinion, most will just lie. I made a YouTube account when I was 12, never made videos, just wanted to comment on stuff, and I said I was 107. Rule of thumb is, if the person says they're 107, they're 12, if they say they're 12, they're 43, but what if they say they're 43, then they're a smart 12-year-old. It's random enough that no one expects it, especially since it isn't the oldest age available or right on the cusp of legality like 18/21. If they say 22, that's just a 16-year-old that had their account for 4 years. I mean, PH and porn sites say you can only view this content if you're 18 plus. Do kids just be like, oh okay, I'll come back when I'm 18? Why do they even have these things if all you have to do is click yes, I'm 18? Even a 17-year-old can figure that out. House, I think it's just a legal thing so they can say, hey, we had the warning, your kid is the one who lied or something if someone complains. That's just my guess. I'll be honest, when I was like 13 I kept thinking, man, I can't wait till I'm 18 and have my own credit card. I'm gonna go to all of these porn sites. Then I discovered a good majority of porn online is free and my mind was blown. I'll be honest, when I was 13, I was having to wait for an entire picture to load, and that was enough. I couldn't even comprehend streaming a video. I got home from school an hour before my parents, which was just enough time to buffer 3 minutes of a video using our dial-up internet before they came home. Have you seen Facebook? A maximum age would be better, for a brief, glorious moment of time. It was that way. Come back 2012, we miss you. Facebook in college was a blast. Notifications actually meant something real that someone had done to interact with you, not algorithmic spam. The chat was a super convenient way to chat with friends. Event invites were actually used in a practical way. Everyone was posting cool pictures and tagging each other. Politics and reposted content was mostly non-existent. Seeing how many happy birthday comments you could get was fun. Also same with Reddit notifications that are fake. Ugh. I don't seem to get those on old.reddit, but I know there's always an exclamation point on the new site. I hate the overstyled modern sites. I don't want colors and ads everywhere. Plain text is often just so much nicer. Like, reading through Snowbum's site every time I work on an old BMW is so relaxing to me. No distractions and all the links just open up more of it. Yeah, there are a couple of ads, but it's not obnoxious and really obvious. You use the new site? Seriously, who here is using the new Reddit site? Even the Reddit admins prefer the old site, user/Apollo app on iPhone or Boost on Android. Also, no more live. I'm in some chat group on Reddit for people whose usernames start with re. It is a constant flood of spam from people like Reigi123. I never asked for this. I think that this would be impossible, but I also think it would have a really good impact on children and their self-esteem. I didn't really have a low self-esteem until middle school when I got social media. Could also stop grooming online and such. However, a lot of kids use the internet as a form of escapism from abusive households by meeting people online. It's kinda a tough call, like many of my middle school friends were saved from suicide by meeting friends online and playing online video games. It got their mind off at the bad stuff happening in their life. I definitely found a lot of good help from online subgroups when I was younger. It's tough. There definitely is a lot of bad out there, and it's important we teach good internet guidelines as a precautionary to avoid issues. I know my family was quite spoken on how I should never share any private info. I know that in my case, if I hadn't have been online in my younger days, I'd just be a self-centered asshole with no perception of how the world worked. I'm glad to hear it was an eye-opening experience for you that way. It's definitely good to see external views, and with the internet you get a vast variety. Oh, absolutely. I first discovered social media when custody was finally transferred to my dad, after living with an abusive mother that put me in a social bubble. It took a couple years, but I got to learn social skills, empathy, proper communication, and similar skills from social media that I never would have properly learned otherwise. Yeah, being on social media 100% helped with my depression, but it's also hurting a lot of people too. It's a tough call. There are a lot of bad groups on social media that are based around chronic mental illness, suicide attempts, etc., and they convince each other it's normal. People go to those groups because they face bullying and abuse in mainstream society for having a psychiatric disorder. Those subcultures have existed for centuries. IIRC, the first one, was the Sturm und Drang movement, which is where we get Werther effect from. And the reason it started in the 1700s was because urbanization and high population made subcultures in general possible, and also the amount of people surviving suicide attempts skyrocketed thanks to better medical technology. However, it's worse for Gen Z because of the size of the echo chambers. Those forums have thousands of users and they can be on it 24/7, as opposed to a group of 10 to 20 acquaintances you meet up with every day or so. That is true, it can kinda be a lose-lose situation where IRL is not good, nor is online. I think it's easier to find a good community online if people are more cautious, because it's harder to change to a new environment IRL, but OFC, that doesn't really apply with mental illness or are otherwise vulnerable in some way. People have gone down radical extremist thoughts due to social media, others learned about people, cultures, practices, beliefs that they don't share and are able to adopt a more nuanced, worldly view and become more accepting of differences. For example, I have a couple of online friends that have been saved through an online community. I have also lurked on groups that fit the bill of what you mention, and it is really bad. It comes with good and bad social media. If it makes you feel any better, middle school has been tough for a long time. I was in middle school in the mid-90s and it was easily the hardest part of the growing up years. You have raging hormones, kids trying to adult too quickly and using cruelty to mask insecurity, the pain of leaving childhood, and, in most cases, a big step up with schoolwork and expectations as a student. We were lucky that we could get off the bus and escape at home, minus landline phone calls, the funny ring that would alert you that it was a three-way call and someone was listening in while your friend would try to get you to talk shit on them. But there was not the persistence of social media following you everywhere. I honestly can't imagine going through that in today's world and feel awful for kids having to learn how to deal with it. Middle school has always and will always suck for almost everyone. Not much is going to change that, ever. Man, I had some guy at a party waxing poetic about how great middle school was, and everybody was like, WTF are you talking about? Middle school years were definitely not my proudest years, but I would be lying if I said they were horrible. If it was enforced for content creation, it would reduce the amount of parents forcing their kids into doing shit they're not interested in. Like seriously, a child being involved should immediately demonetize the content. Social media in general creates a false reality that things are easier. That should fall on the parent's decision. If your kid has a social media presence, you should have a healthy enough connection to them to make sure it's not giving them mental health issues. Now this I can definitely get behind. The parents may be able to approve their child being a part of social media content, but the child sure can't consent to it. Late to the party. As terrible as it is for self-esteem, body image, whatever else. I think the far bigger issue is parents posting enough pictures of their children that Facebook and whatever else has ready-made profiles and algorithms that have been following them for X years. With privacy going away nearly everywhere in every facet, the young generation doesn't even have a say in their own privacy from the get-go, but yeah, IG is probably destroying young people's body image and standards. Nah, the world would be a better place if social media companies had significantly less power than they do, and if parents raised their children to have a healthy relationship to the internet and social media. 18 doesn't matter if you're unprepared for how to manage social media and everything that comes with it. We're really just in the beginning stages of seeing what it's like to have children grow up in a world where you can access everything online literally anywhere, anytime, and as a society. We're completely unprepared for how to do that and have generally been very bad at predicting what the future will look like and how we can anticipate our changing needs based on technology that evolves much faster than we can. I don't think so. Some of the worst offenders on SM are 40-year-old soccer moms living out drama like 13-year-olds. Again, I'm not accusing below 18 of being a problem, I'm saying it's a problem for them. Definitely. I don't have any socials, which is unheard of for my age, 23F. Just Reddit. The other ones were pretty hard on my mental health, same here, and even Reddit pushes it honestly. The amount of body dysmorphia you see on Instagram alone makes me worry. There are adult women getting ridiculous plastic surgeries to look more like the Facetune version of themselves. I can't imagine what a steady diet of filtered and photoshopped pics does to a kid. I actually saw an account post a candid shot of Kim Kardashian where you can see that her face has pores and fine lines, and a ton of the comments were accusing the OP of editing the imperfections in. Like they've seen so many ultra smooth shots of her they don't believe it's real when they see her unretouched in natural light. I run a mental health community, which includes a lot of minors. In particular, minors with bad home lives. Community and distraction are lifesavers, literally. Especially for trans kids right now, who are being attacked with more viciousness than I've ever seen in this country. There's a lot of kids whose lives wouldn't be continuing without being able to reach outside the bubble their parents put them in, so I think any annoyance or toxicity in the broader internet sphere is worth the fact that the internet being broadly available saves the lives of a lot of kids. Their lives matter more than adults not getting annoyed in public. I don't really disagree about the benefits that you are talking about, but I think the broader negatives overall might potentially outweigh them. There have been a lot of studies done showing the correlation of increased rates of depression and other related issues with higher social media use. The actual causation has been looked at by a few different studies, and several conclude that it is because of decreased in-person face-to-face socialization. So it's easier for kids post-smartphone to go through their school years physically socializing less. Smartphones became a thing when I was in college, and for all of my childhood I never really experienced the general lack of face-to-face social contact and bonding that is way more common today. Even though we had internet and basic cell phones, the technology was limited enough that it still was just helping to facilitate that in-person contact versus replacing it. I've done a bunch of work with a non-profit with high school kids, and at least from my anecdotal experience, the vast majority of them, regardless of any of their personal characteristics or home life, spend their time socializing online versus with their friends in person. Lots of them don't feel like they have many friends in person, and it's not because they are ostracized because of who they are or their family situation, it's simply that they never formed those bonds to begin with. So to me there is a net negative for children going through their developmental years with social media. I think that what you say definitely stands, as I know many people where the internet and being able to form a community outside their negative day-to-day situation essentially saved them. It's hard to gauge that number of people versus the massive amount of kids who are just regular social media users. I think internet education before kids are on social media is the best first step to take, but if access to social media were somehow limited, which is gonna be pretty hard to do effectively, then special access could be given to kids where it could be a benefit. Anyway, TLDR, I think for a lot of people it's not at all about adults being annoyed by social media, more that it's actually causing damage to kids during their developmental years when they need to be socializing in person. I would also take into account that, especially for a lot of American kids these days who live in suburbia, it can be very difficult to make in-person friendships, because they have to cross 4-lane streets or it's just too far for them to walk to a friend's house. Also, walking to school together can help form a lot of friendships as well. So I can understand kids who just don't have the means to make these friendships work, since there's not much they can actually do with friends if there are no shops, parks, or public spaces in general nearby, and they live so far apart from one another. Also, having to be driven by your parents everywhere and having to be supervised all the time can hinder a lot of children's growth and independence, So overall, until these things can be addressed, I would say it would do more harm than good to cut them off from social media, since a lot of these kids already are so socially isolated to begin with. It would be like cutting off your only way of communicating and feeling even slightly less alone. But with saying that, I do think there's some truth to what you're saying as well. I don't think what either of us is saying is mutually exclusive. It would objectively be a much worse place. In order for this type of rule to be enforced, government-issued identification would be need to used. This in itself is a horrible idea because it creates a direct link between the user and the person. This would immediately be used by both government agencies to commit atrocities and criminals alike. This already happens in countries like India and Israel. Ignoring this massive unsolvable issue, it would also prevent people from freely engaging in discourse, as anything they say could lead to them directly, resulting in them being witch-hunted for any opinions outside of the current accepted ideals. Beyond the batshit crazy illegal shit this type identification would enable and hyper-aggressive echo chambers this would create. It would economically impact these services and drastically shutter their growth due to the increased barrier to entry. This would result in stifled innovation, as it would make creating and expanding a competing social media platform next to impossible, resulting in only the pre-established giants competing in a race to the bottom. This would only further exasperate issue number 2. There are a whole host of other issues with this idea, but given this is a Reddit post and not a fucking college essay, I'll leave it at this. The world is better when everyone has access to a mask. Glad someone here is able to explain the intricacies enough, which many just don't catch on to. Absolutely not. Internet is a way of communicating for those who feel misunderstood in society, a way to find people with common interests even if everyone hates you in your class. Imagine being an outcast for one reason or another, having topics you have no one to discuss with, etc. The only reason I even am a member of society nowadays and am alive is that I always talked to people far away from me. And this didn't start with social media. Even before them, I was searching for friends and finding them through newspapers for children where you could find pen pals. What is absolutely needed, though, is rules of safe internet browsing taught in school. I did not know them when I was 11 to 14 yo, put my address, phone number and such everywhere and got a lot of dick pics via MMS. Which I am now very surprised about because that shit is expensive. Damn, you weren't taught not to put your contact details on the net. Nope, there was no one that would teach me because I got a computer when I was 10 and my mom understood even less about internet and computers than I did. Cause this was the first computer in our family. And we put those things in newspaper ads no problem back in the days, as well as they could be found in phone books, so there was really no reason to think by default that internet is something different. Edit. I don't even think that it was talked about at all at that time, 2002, all those fancy rules were formulated later. Also, we need to educate about healthy relationships and toxic communities offline and online. There are a lot of bad groups on social media that are based around chronic mental illness, suicide attempts, etc., and they convince each other it's normal. People go to those groups because they face bullying and abuse in mainstream society for having a psychiatric disorder. Those subcultures have existed for centuries. IIRC, the first one, was the Sturm und Drang movement, which is where we get Werther effect from. And the reason it started in the 1700s was because urbanization and high population made subcultures in general possible, and also the amount of people surviving suicide attempts skyrocketed thanks to better medical technology. However, it's worse for Gen Z because of the size of the echo chambers. Those forums have thousands of users and they can be on it 24/7, as opposed to a group of 10 to 20 acquaintances you meet up with every day or so. I agree with your first sentence, but don't really get what you're talking about after that. Do you mean it is bad when people discuss their mental health online and find people who have the same mental problems? Why? And surely you don't believe that children end their lives just because bad people online told them to. Actually, your last sentence is correct in some cases. Those with very low self-esteem and reason for living can very much be affected by a horde of strangers telling them they should die. Social pressure. Cyberbullying, for instance, has led to suicides. A lot of suicide commits are done impulsively, not due to a meticulous plan. That being said, I believe for every person that has been harmed by social media, there is another person who has benefited from social media, mental health-wise. Also, I know a site that they are probably referring to, where suicide is seen as okay and people go there to get tips on how to kill themselves. The people there are generally kind to what I've seen, and don't recommend suicide for younger folks, but there is not that same suicide is never an option mentality that the normative population have, and probably why those looking from the outside would be horrified and view it as toxic and psychologically damaging. It's more like, we would rather you not die. But if you really wish to, we won't stop you and will support you on your way. I am not mentioning the site because I don't want anyone else to search it up for, well, obvious reasons. I guess we have different associations with that. I meant stuff like Momo Hoax/Blue Whale, which are probably made up by the groups that want to restrict internet for children, so they say that a child can commit suicide because of a bet or a game, and not because of the actual problems with peers or parents. I agree with what you said in the first paragraph. But also, bullying exists in the web and IRL. It's not just a problem of social media. Never heard of that site, and this stuff is outlawed in my country since forever, so yeah. It's wild to me that such a site can freely exist. But now I understand it better. Overall, this question, as well as question of euthanasia, is a morally difficult one. I agree with you that help to these people is in order, but not everyone would think this way. The fact that I might have to see a 14-year-old's opinion online is disgusting. There should absolutely be an age limit for internet access. On a more serious note, not only would that be hard to enforce, but I suspect radical behavior in terrorist groups wouldn't have such ready access to younger vulnerable people. It would be a great thing for kids and their futures, 100%. The enforcement would be a particularly hard challenge. We already have people saying masks on children is child abuse, so if we took away phones from kids, what would these parents have to parent with? And no, that isn't sarcasm. Long video. How do you think the world would look without social networks before the age of 18? Write in the comments. If you liked the video, leave a like and a subscribe, and see you next time.